Welcome back to Grow Your Own Vegetables, where a community of trusted teaching partners helps you grow real food in any space, in every season. What if you never had to buy spices from a jar again? Most of us assume spices are too tricky to grow, that they belong to faraway farms in exotic climates. The truth is, almost every spice in your cabinet can be grown right at home, and they're often more beautiful than your vegetables. What you're about to watch is a live talk given at one of our past Grow Your Own Vegetables events, recorded for gardeners just like you. Today's teacher is Tasha Greer, a homesteader, author, and lifelong spice gardener who grows almost every flavor in her kitchen cabinet right from her own backyard. Today, Tasha is walking you through her own spice garden, from how to grow ginger and turmeric at home to the surprising spices that double as stunning flowers, plus the one spice you should plant right now if you want to harvest this year. Pour yourself some tea. Let's spend a little time together. For more information, free resources, and gentle guidance, you can find us at growyourownvegetables.org. And to grow alongside other gardeners just like you, join our free community at gyov.org. Settle in. You're going to enjoy this.
I can't wait to share all sorts of wonderful information about growing spices year-round with all of you viewers out there. And as you know, spices, they usually don't have a whole lot of calories, but they pack an enormous health punch. And that's one of the reasons that I absolutely love them. The other reason is because they're stunningly beautiful. And I think I would grow a lot of spices even if I didn't eat them. And for me to say that is phenomenal because I'm a homesteader and pretty much everything I grow is to be eaten. Okay, but I just got to go on record and say this. Every time I come to one of these events, I'm always secretly hoping to get to see inside somebody's garden. So today, that's what we're going to do. Contrary to what you may have heard, spices actually do need to be loved and cared for. So regular watering, pond water, or anything without chlorine is going to be wonderful for your spices. Also, don't feel like you need to isolate them. They can grow right in with all of your other plants if you plant it right. Another really wonderful thing about spices is that they grow for very long periods of time. So here in the background, these plants back here, this is caraway. And caraway, it's already starting to go to seed. It actually started leafing out back in February, and now it's putting on all of its seeds, and it'll stand until July or August if I want it to. I could also dry the seeds earlier if I prefer not to leave them in the garden if I need that space for something else. And now garlic. Wow, that stuff is beautiful from when you plant it in fall all the way through until when you harvest it right around the summer equinox, maybe a little bit before or after depending on your conditions. And it also has a lot of terrific weed tolerance once it gets going. So it doesn't necessarily outcompete, but because you sow the garlic a lot deeper than some of the roots of the annual weeds that plague spring gardens, it has plenty of nutrients and doesn't really mind, so you don't have to do a lot of additional weeding. And then the horseradish. You can grow it as an annual. That's a lot of work. But if you grow it as a perennial, it will come up very early in the season. It'll put on a stunning flower show. And then it will grow to astounding heights and fill up a lot of space in your garden. And it will stand all the way through until a couple of frosts when you can dig it up and harvest the delicious roots. Now you leave the center of the plant, that's the big part, but you harvest all the small tender roots along the side, and those taste the best. You don't even have to peel them. All you need to do is wash them with the scrub brush to get off the dirt, and then throw them in your food processor to make your delicious horseradish preserved in vinegar that will keep for a year. And Poppies put on a spectacular show. This guy's just now breaking open, and then after that they turn into those beautiful flowers, and then after that they start out as small pods, and then they get to these really large pods. And those tops right there, those little star tops, if you look at them right now, let me get underneath, they're all sealed up. But as those pods dry, there will become vents right underneath here. And those vents will actually open up and allow you to pour out the seeds. So if you harvest them just before the vents open, when the shells are hard and dry and they rattle, and then let those vents open a little bit, in the bag or while you're kind of hanging them over a tarp, then they don't have to self-sow so much in your garden, and you'll get all that harvest. The best time to plant poppies is in fall. All you got to do is scatter the seeds where you want them to grow. Aren't these stunning? Poppy also makes lots of lovely foliage even before it flowers. And that usually happens pretty easy early in the season. Although if you get the really fancy cultivars or varieties of Papaver somniferum, those start a little bit later. And so you can get a progressive show of poppies. They don't all have to come out at once if you just plan the varieties that you use. Here are some that are just getting going. Lavender, if you can grow it, in the U.S. that's USDA cold hardiness zones 5 and above, you can find cultivars for. But if you can grow it, it flowers in late spring and summer, but it has wonderful green foliage all through winter. So that is something that can add beauty all winter long. Now these guys, this is the sort of Provençal or Tuscan type of lavender. They don't start until later in the season, so these flowers are just getting going. But there are other cultivars or varieties like this Munstead that starts earlier. So you could actually get flowers all the way from spring through to summer. So these guys here are really quite ready. They're very plump. They're just getting ready to open. So we can just harvest. You can pinch off the stems. If you prefer to cut them, you can do that. I usually like to just pinch off the stems because then it doesn't take up so much space in drying. And half my work is done. I don't have so many stems to sift through. That's how easy it is to harvest really beautiful lavender buds as flavorful spice. Now for the perennial question. What's the difference between an herb and a spice? Let me use garlic as an example. So I actually plant entire heads of garlic underground, and then when the greens come up, I harvest those greens over and over again, and I use them like chives as a tender leafy herb. But I also plant individual cloves underground, and those cloves ultimately from basically October through June end up producing this very large head of garlic that has multiple cloves inside. And when I harvest the underground parts, the mature parts that I could then replant, that's a spice. Fenugreek is another perfect example. The leaves are called methy, and when you harvest those, they're an herb. But meanwhile, if you wait and harvest them for these long pods, these are just getting going, so they haven't really filled out with their seeds yet. But later, when they're nice and plump and start to dry a little bit, then those you can use as the spice. And you can see these flowers will just keep coming for a while. Meanwhile, this is cumin. And cumin is really just a plant that you grow over, 4 months, about sometimes maybe 5 months, depending on your conditions. And you grow cumin primarily for the seeds. So cumin is not an herb, it's really just a spice. This one is caraway, same thing. It's a biennial, and that means you plant it in the previous spring, it'll grow through winter the following year, and then it'll set seeds, but it's the seeds that you harvest. And that horseradish, you can definitely harvest the above ground leaves, particularly when they're young. They have a nice mustardy taste, so it could be an herb, but mostly what you harvest is the underground roots that actually you take them after a frost. Now this beauty here, this is chicory. And chicory is something that I grow for the root. The root, basically you can plant them and you can just sow the seeds in early spring or even, in winter if you want to. And they'll germinate once once it warms up just a little bit. And they will grow all the way through until about October, November. And after they've had maybe a mild frost, just to kind of sweeten them up a little bit, then you harvest the entire root, chop it into pieces, roast it a little bit in the oven, just to kind of brown and caramelize it, and then dry them completely. And then you can just throw them in your coffee grinder, and use them like coffee beans for a coffee substitute, or to cut the caffeine and mix in your coffee. So these are really, not everybody thinks of them as a spice, but they're the mature underground part of a plant, and they are primarily a flavor source, but they're also a wonderful liver tonic. So if you have a really good Saturday night, then maybe on Sunday you could have some chicory coffee. These leaves are also edible. They're pretty bitter, and so, it's something in small quantities. They're also good cooked. So they could be a really flavorful, sort of bitter component to a dish if you're using them for that. But I do want to show you, if you decide you want to save your seeds or just enjoy them as a decorative plant, they get really big, and they have these wonderful branching flower heads. These haven't opened yet, but they'll have these beautiful blue flowers. Mustard, mustard, this stuff is beautiful. It's a wonderful leafy plant that you can eat the greens of, and the greens, when you eat them, we actually treat those as a vegetable, but the seeds, when you harvest them to use as a condiment, that's a spice because it has a strong flavor and it's the seed portion. Fennel, especially this gorgeous bronze fennel, is another wonderful spice and herb. The leafy green parts are really candy sweet, and you can use them in salads, but when you harvest the pollen or you harvest the seeds, that's a spice. Allspice is another great example of sort of the difference between a spice and an herb. So we're really used to eating the fruit parts, the dried fruit of the allspice. But here, it's really hard for me to grow the fruit, so I really just use the leafy greens. Now, the tender parts up here at the top, when the leaves first emerge, those are kind of soft and you can almost chew them. But as the leaves get older and they're more leathery, those really are just aromatics. You're going to put them in, you're going to, allow them to offer the aroma and the flavor, and then you're going to take them back out because you would not chew those. So in allspice, these older leaves are the spice. The dried fruit berries that we're used to eating, those are the spice. But if you were to use these tender leafy greens, because they're tender and they're young and they didn't take a long time to grow, those are not a spice. Those are an herb. So breaking this down as a gardener, herbs are the tender leafy parts, and spice is basically everything that takes you a lot more work to grow. All right, well, it's not really that much more work to grow spices. They take longer. So, this ginger and turmeric, which we're going to plant today, that is going to take, probably we're going to plant it now, which I'm doing this recording in May, and I'm going to harvest it probably in December. And so, it's like a 7-month process. But, some of the other stuff, it's 4 months for a lot of the seed spices that are annuals. But, if you're growing coriander for seeds, it's 4 to 5 months. If you're growing cilantro for the leaves, it's 4 weeks. So it is just longer care. Now, let me tell you a little bit about planting ginger and turmeric. We're going to plant, that's a turmeric mother, and you really do, when you're planting turmeric, don't plant one of the fingers. Get yourself a mother that already has several fingers on there, because those little nodes, that's going to make a lot of difference in your harvest. So the larger piece you have, the better. And then same thing, when you're doing a cutting of a ginger rhizome, don't be cheap here, guys. Get yourself a large 2-ounce piece. Now this is the bed inside my greenhouse where I'm going to plant. It's got about 12 inches of soil, and I'm going to give each plant a lot of space. The more space you give a plant, the bigger your harvests. You can absolutely grow these things in 1-gallon pots, but you're not going to get really large harvests. Turmeric, look at that. That's 1 plant. That's the harvest from 2 plants. So you really need to give these guys some space, otherwise they won't be able to do this magical rhizome spreading that we want them to do. Okay, so this soil was used for growing lettuce all winter long, so it needs some amending before we can start planting the wonderful ginger and turmeric. So I'm putting on, basically in a 4x4 square foot area, a bag of compost, and I'm also putting on some organic fertilizer. And I really like the organic kind that have the mycorrhizae in it. So mix all that in really well, and then smooth back out your soil so you have a nice planting surface. And then what you need to do, again, you want every 4x4 space, you're going to do that same process. Lay out your spices, your little pieces in a grid. This is kind of like it's like a 5 on a dice. So I try to give them about 6 to 8 inches between each piece on, the crosswise, and about 10 to 12 inches apart, because that gives them plenty of root space to grow in. Now, it doesn't have to be like this, but that's just in the planting area I've got. That gives everything lots of room to expand and do that amazing rhizome production. All right, so now we've got everything laid out on that pattern, so let's just plant them. So dig it in. This is about, the bottom is at about 2 inches under the soil, so the top is more shallow, and I just covered it back up. And just do that for every piece all the way across. And that's really, you really want to be able to dig in the soil like this. If your soil is harder than that, then there's no way those rhizomes can spread. So that's a good consistency for the soil, and just continue all the way through. The really important thing to know about these plants is that you want to target your watering below where you planted that rhizome piece. So you need to water deep, and you don't want the water primarily focused on the rhizome because it's going to rot. Here's an example of one of the ginger plants I harvested last year. So you can see that tiny piece on the left. That's the 2-ounce piece that I planted originally. And then you see the rhizome that was produced from that seed plant. Plus you can see the stem on top, and you can see a few of the roots on bottom. So really that rhizome, it's an extension of the green stem part on the top. And so just like you're always careful about watering your stems above ground because you don't want them to get stem rot, you don't want your underground parts to get that either. So that's why you're targeting the root zone. This plant is galangal. It grows very much like turmeric or ginger, except for that it's more cold hardy. Down to about 20 degrees, it'll actually go dormant in winter, and so it can overwinter in like zone 7B and above. So for this one, if it's not, if you don't dig up the rhizomes, you can just leave them in the ground, and whenever you want to divide your plant or harvest, you just dig down underneath and just take what you need. It does take a little bit of tugging. You may want to get a knife, but I'm just breaking off a little bit here to show you how to plant this. So that little piece can start a brand new plant. All we're going to do is move it over here to a new patch of soil and just put it down just like we did the other rhizome, and it will start to grow again. And you saw it had very few roots. That's because it was dormant and it was just starting to wake up, so it regrows those roots later. Let's repeat the same process inside. I have this like vegetable cart. It's really cool because it's on wheels. It's pretty deep. It's like 9 inches deep. It's also self-watering, so you just fill that up instead of top watering so you don't get so many flies and things. But just like we did in the greenhouse, when you're growing these inside, all you need is that really good soil and fertilizer, and then you can poke a little hole and tuck those guys in. The thing about growing this stuff inside is you almost never have enough light. So once you get it in place, then you need to get some light on it. And I really love these goosenecks because you can just position them right over the plant. And then as the plant grows taller, you can raise the lights so that way they don't end up getting burned. So here you can see this is just like 2 weeks later. Everything's popping out of the container now, and I've moved the lights up. So you can absolutely do this inside. You just need enough soil mass, and you need to make sure to keep that filled. I really like self-watering indoors, not outdoors, because outdoors you get rain. That makes it a little bit more difficult to control the moisture using that device. And this is one of my favorite ways to plant ginger outside. I have these old galvanized tubs that the bottoms have worn out of, so I put them in between some of my other trees. It's still full sun, but all those other plants kind of increase the humidity and make it feel a little bit tropical. So then you add just some kind of potting soil mix, some organic mix or a raised bed mix, put some of that good organic fertilizer on there, mix it in, and since you're starting from scratch here, just don't fill it all the way to the top. That way the fertilizer is down below where you're going to plant the rhizomes. And so once you get that all mixed in, then same thing that you did out there. Now, I have my rhizomes, I've kept them dormant until May, and I'm going to let them grow outside until October. I'm not going to get a huge harvest off of this because it's just not a long enough period, but I'll get some nice young ginger. You don't want to start growing outside until after it's frost-free, till temperatures are consistently above 55 and preferably closer to 70. So, like a week or two after you put your tomatoes out. You can also take out, transplant out some already started plants. So it would be the same process, but water. And if you do get any cold weather, please take some, precautions at night. Maybe just put one of these plastic bags over your growing area. Take that off as soon as it warms up again, but that'll keep your plant healthy. So let's go back to that fenugreek that we talked about earlier. Now this particular plant, I really love it because it smells delicious. The leaves do, the pods do, the flowers do. Everything about it is delicious and aromatic. And I'm a goat owner, and it's also really good to give to your goats because it's great for lactating mothers. Now here are the seeds, and the real trick with fenugreek is soak those seeds for 4 to 8 hours before you plant them. And then very much like the ginger, just different sort of depths and sizes, but we're just going to poke a little hole in the soil. And you can see again, I always use well-prepared soil. It just makes it so much easier. Now these guys are only planting about somewhere between 1/2 and 1/4 inch underground. And so I always put a few extra seeds when I'm sowing spices because they always have irregular germination. And then just close it over. And I'm actually going to make a whole row of these, so I usually just poke my holes, put my seeds in, and then close them afterwards. That way I don't forget where I planted. And then water. Now the difference between watering these seeds and watering those rhizomes is that you need the seeds to stay moist because that's going to help the little germplasm inside break dormancy and start producing plants. So shallow water until these guys germinate and then start focusing on deep watering. They will grow to take up about 1 foot of space. They're not very big plants or very bushy plants when you're growing them for seed spices. So you could put 3 together in a hole if you wanted to, just as long as they have good air circulation and plenty of nutrients in the soil. Now, these are those pods I showed you earlier. They're not ready to harvest yet. It's going to be a while till they plump and start to dry. But when they are dry, you can just shell them like pea pods. And here's what the little seedlings look like. And you do want to try to keep these guys well weeded because they're not very aggressive growing. So they don't like a whole lot of competition. And there's another thing that distinguishes spices from herbs. With spices, you kind of have to know exactly when to harvest to get them at peak flavor. And every spice is just a little bit different, but there's always some point of maturity that you have to achieve to get the best results. And then after that, there's going to be some kind of drying, curing, or processing that you need to do to, make sure that it's durable for the long run. Now, it's just not quite the right time of year for me to harvest any of the spices I've shown you today, but I want to give you some hints to lead you in the right direction. So my garlic is getting really close. You can see on some of these plants that the leaves are starting to yellow, the tips are dying. What's actually happening here is that the plant is kind of sensing it's, the conditions are getting warmer, the day length is almost at its peak, and so it knows it doesn't have that much longer to keep growing. So it starts funneling all the nutrition that was stored in the leaves down into the bulb below. And as that happens, the bulb starts to form individual cloves, and each of these little leaves is actually connected to like the layers underneath ground. And so that's where it'll start to get the like papery coating that you associate with garlic. Now, this is not ready to harvest because this stem is still really fat and juicy. When they get to the point where they're about ready to harvest, this down here will actually start to have dried a little bit. It'll feel a bit papery. And you don't want to wait too long when you get to that point. You want to try to harvest right away because if you have a big rain or something, it could rot. But keep an eye on your stems. Once you start seeing these signals, then keep an eye on those stems. And as soon as they start to soften up, then you'll want to get those guys out of the ground. Now this is actually a hardneck variety, and so I really know it's going to be a few more weeks because with the hardnecks, these flower scapes come out. And it's about a week or two after that that you get to harvest. And this one is literally just peeking out. But now this guy over here is more mature. So what happens, they come out straight like that other example I showed you. And then the bigger they get, they start to curl. So once they make that first curl, that's when I really like to harvest them. And you just come down here, right here, cut that guy off. And they are a little bit tough, so you can't really break them so easily. So I usually just come out with some scissors and snip it off. And then you can take these guys and just salt, pepper, olive oil, and a light saute. They are so completely delicious. As for curing garlic, I left this example here, but this was just a garlic from last year that I left hanging just to see how long it would last. And it's actually lasted all winter long. It's still pretty hard, but that's all I do is just throw them over basically a hanging laundry line. I did get this one fresh one. You can just fold it over like that if you don't live in a very windy area, or you can twist them, Some people braid, but I really, we're kind of in a humid climate, and for me, it's really important that each one be spaced out. So the next one will have a couple inches between this one and the one next to it. That way they have good air circulation and they don't touch each other while they're drying. The actual drying time is going to vary depending on where you live, your conditions, how dry your air is. So in my part of North Carolina, it usually takes maybe 3 or 4 weeks, sometimes a little bit longer. But when they have a nice papery coating, then you can store them wherever you normally store garlic. Now this is a superfood summit, and so I do just want to take a couple seconds to explain what makes spices such superfoods. Basically, they all are for different reasons and different benefits, but it comes down to 2 words: volatile compounds. The things that make spices so aromatic are also the things that make them so potent for your health. So for example, this horseradish preserved in vinegar, that's exactly what you need to knock your nose, sinus, and everything clear when you've got a bad cold. But all the other spices we've been talking about are great too. There's garlic, of course, ginger, turmeric. These guys have great antioxidant benefits, heart smart, heart healthy. all the peppers, that capsicum, that stuff is just so great for all sorts of inflammation kind of, protection. Then there's the dill seeds. These are wonderful for like your stomach. There's the chicory, which is fantastic for like a liver tonic. And then, oh, sesame. Sesame is just a wonderful protein source. And once you toast it, you release all those volatile compounds and it just, blows you away with the aroma. And then let's not forget my personal favorite, mustard. This stuff, whether it's used as an oil, whether you toast it, whether you make a condiment out of it, it's just so good for you and just it makes you feel so energetic. We've talked about a lot of things you can grow outside, but I don't want you to feel like you only have to garden outdoors to grow spices. I showed you the example of what I was growing inside. This is a little, indoor raised bed, essentially, where I've got 1 turmeric, 2 ginger, and 1 galangal growing. The galangal is smaller than the other 2 plants, so it won't occupy as much space. But I also have just a little tamarind growing right here. This guy's just getting going, but I'll keep it very small, and I'll actually do some root trimming and basically treat it like a bonsai. So I grow other things as well. So I need to water this guy. That's a perfect example of a plant that needs watering, but that's an avocado that I started from seed. And over here is a turmeric that has just kind of come out of a small container. Now, like I said, I won't get huge yields out of a space this small, but I'll get a beautiful plant. What I really want to show you though is this is a cutting of vanilla that I started not too long ago, and it's growing in orchid mix, and it's actually training itself to this window surface back here. So it's kind of suctioned on there with its roots, and so it will kind of just keep growing up. Now vanilla does need to grow up at least 3 feet and grow back down, so I'm actually training it up the mirror, and then I'll have it extend a little bit further up and then come down this wood panel over here. And it will take a few years because this is a non-ideal climate for it. But you can absolutely grow some spices indoors as well. I wanted to end today here in my greenhouse with my lovely cardamom. This is a very large plant. It really only likes temperatures that stay above 55 and warmer, of course, during its growing season. But this is a lovely exotic, grows very much like the ginger, turmeric, and galangal that we've talked about. But the thing with cardamom is that you're going to get the seed pods from it. It's probably going to take somewhere from 3 to 5 years for this plant to get to mature size and want to flower. Giving you the aerial view there. And so for something like that, you need a lot of space, and that's where if you get hooked on spices, you might need a greenhouse. The last little bit of information I want to leave you with is that the spice season starts right now. Go get your saffron corms because that's the next thing to plant. You usually start those in like July or August, depending on your climate, and then you'll get your flowers a couple months later. After that is garlic, and garlic is going to sell out fast this year because there's so many new gardeners who want to try it. So make sure you get your seed garlic ASAP. You can also order perennial plants. So if you do want to try some of these exotics, you want to get already started plants and have them shipped to you in nice weather. So fall is like end of summer, beginning of fall, when it's not too hot, not too cold. That's a great time to order those plants. And also start thinking about seeds for next year, because things do sell out so fast now that you want to get your order in as soon as you can. I hope you guys really enjoy spice gardening and eat as many as you can. They're low calorie, high flavor, and potent volatile compounds.
If today's video helped, we'd love to invite you to something special. Every year, Grow Your Own Vegetables hosts the free Superfood Garden Summit, where dozens of gardening teachers share more videos just like the one you watched today, helping you grow healthier, more abundant food at home. Whether you join us live or watch the replay, grab your free ticket at the link in the description below. Thank you for spending this time with us.